Pashandete, welcome to Inside Albania with me, Alice Taylor. This week we're going to be discussing Albania's commitment to social rights as laid down by the Council of Europe in its European Social Charter. I'm also going to be delving a little bit into the results of the 2023 census to find out about a bit of the controversy and what the data means. And I'm also going to be finding out about how an Albanian woman in the UK is using archaeology to help vulnerable people. But before we go any further, also this week, Albania has had some devastating news, which is the death of its most famous and most respected writer, Ismail Kadare. He passed away earlier this week at the age of 88 following months of deteriorating health. He is best known for his books and his essays and poems written about Albania, translated into 45 different languages. He has won countless prizes, both internationally and locally, for his work, and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature no less than 15 times. When I first came to Albania, his books provided a lot of guidance and information for me on understanding the country's complex past and its complex present as well. In particular, for those who are interested, Broken April and The Palace of Dreams were very important reading for me. This week has seen 2 days of mourning after his death, and it's been a very sad day for Albanians and the literature world. This week, the Council of Europe held a European Committee of Social Rights conference in Lithuania. Now, the aim of this was to address the implementation of the European Social Charter. Now, this is a charter that was created in 1996 to lay down social rights for people within the Council of Europe's member states. It was designed to go alongside the European Charter of Human Rights, which covers political rights and human rights. The Charter lays down specific protection for social rights, including housing, health, education, social protection, welfare, including vulnerable people such as children, the elderly, disabled people and migrants. Now, I spoke to President of the committee, Aoife Nolan, to find out how Albania, a signatory to the convention, is doing when it comes to its implementation and obligations. Aoife, welcome to Inside Albania.
Thanks very much, Alice.
Now, first of all, how does Albania fare when it comes to the European Social Charter? Has it adopted it? Where do we stand in terms of implementation?
Albania has indeed volunteered to be bound by the revised European Social Charter. This is an international treaty from 1996, which Albania ratified and thereby agreed to be bound by in 2002. And in doing so, Albania signed up to 64 out of the 98 elements or provisions of the Charter, which isn't a very high level. And also what's notable about the commitments that Albania has made is while it's wonderful and it's signed up to a very wide range of, for instance, labour rights related issues, there are also some very significant gaps in terms of what it hasn't signed up to. And to highlight a couple of key areas, Albania has not yet has not volunteered to be bound by the rights to social security, the rights to social and medical assistance, which are fundamental when it comes to ensuring adequate legal protection, when it comes to social protection for people in Albania. And interestingly, and Albania is unusual in this, Albania hasn't volunteered to be bound by it, hasn't accepted Article 16 on the social, legal and economic protection of the family, which covers things like housing, family benefits, domestic violence, and nor has it signed up to the right of children and young persons to social, legal and economic protection. And that is a right that includes things like the right to education. It includes a right that gives to the right of children to protection. So including, it creates an obligation for states, for instance, to prohibit physical punishment of children. And it includes a whole range of rights that support children in their day-to-day life through service provision and, support for families, the kind of things that governments want to be doing when they think about children and young people, but for which, for some reason, Albania has not yet signed up to when it comes to the Charter itself, even though we know that Albania is working very hard in these areas at the domestic level.
Okay, so there are a number of challenges, as you've mentioned there. Now, is there ongoing dialogue with Albania regarding this? I mean, what are they hesitating over? Have you sort of encouraged them to pick up the pace a little bit?
So there have been previous engagements with Albania around the question of adopting more provisions, more elements of the Charter. It's because those conversations were quite long ago now, in the 2000s. Some of that information is now out of date, so I'm hesitant to get too involved in talking about what the reasons were then, because of course they may not be the reasons now. Very positively, Albania has sent us in a report providing detail on the Charter provisions it hasn't volunteered to be bound by, which means that over the next year, we have a really good basis to have a dialogue with Albania about how they can move forward their commitments and the rights that they are bound by in terms of the Charter. So while there's been a long gap, we now have a really excellent springboard from which to push forward this conversation about how Albania can improve its record in terms of what it's agreed to be bound by, but also how my committee can support and provide assistance to Albania in taking on additional commitments and, of course, giving effect to them on the ground. Because ultimately, it's not about a tick box of signing up to international treaty provisions. That doesn't help anyone, really. What's important is about taking those provisions that you have signed up to and making them real in practice for the people living in Albania.
Do you know why they're hesitating, sort of specifically? Is this a regional issue? Is it something that's affecting other countries in the region? Is it a political thing? Is it a lack of the tools to implement?
We haven't had a report from Albania for the last 2 years, which is a very unfortunate omission. It means we can't actually, we can't carry out assessments, we can't engage with Albania. So I suppose what I would really like to do is to call on Albania and welcome them to engage to a greater degree with the Charter system. Our committee would be very happy to talk to policymakers, to talk to government officials, to talk to whoever it takes in order to help build capacity and confidence around the Charter so that more commitments can be brought on, but actually that Albania, can take very important step forwards in terms of giving effect to the commitments that it has already volunteered to be bound by.
Now, following the conference, which I understand was a great success this week, what are the main messages you want Albania, the Albanian government and authorities to take away? And this is in general in terms of social rights and with particular reference to the Charter itself.
What I would love to see is Albania taking advantage of this opportunity provided by the high-level conference in Vilnius that we've just had, the conversations that took place around that event and to use that as the basis, as a way of moving forward to progress social rights and its engagement with the social charter system in collaboration with us, but also in relation to other entities that can provide support to the government and other national actors working in charter areas, whether it be health, whether it be education, social protection, children's rights, women's rights, disabled people's rights, whatever.
Linda Trinder is an Albanian archaeologist originally from Fear. Now, she moved to the UK 17 years ago and has worked as an Albanian English translator and is now currently a PhD researcher. She's also a Fellow of Higher Education and an MA module lead and lecturer at Staffordshire University. But she stayed in touch with her archaeological roots and her Albanian roots, and she's working on an initiative to combine archaeology with helping refugees and asylum seekers who've entered the UK. These are two things, archaeology and migration, that you might not normally put together, but here we are. Melinda, welcome to Inside Albania. It's a pleasure to meet you, albeit virtually.
It's nice to meet you, Alice, as well. Yeah, thank you very much.
First things first, I'm in Albania. I'm English. You are in the UK. You're Albanian. What took you to the UK?
Love. Love at first sight, actually. I was born in Albania, as you know, and I was an archaeologist. And many years ago, I met this English guy who just heard about Albania, and he was very intrigued to see what Albania was like. And the moment we met, we knew we were going to get married and have children. And I moved to England over 17 years ago.
Wow, that's quite a story. Do you miss home at all? Or is the UK home now?
I do. I do. It's interesting because I call my husband my home, but it takes me 2 seconds to realize that Albania is home. And the thing I miss most is things you can't describe, like the smell of chai malit, oregano, this type of smell, sound, people talking. I miss everything about Albania.
Oh yeah, it's funny. You've lived in the UK almost longer than I did, you know. But I wanted to ask you. Let's get straight to it. So, you are involved with what appears to be a really great initiative, the Family Festival of Archaeology and Pottery. Tell me about this. How did you get involved with this, and what's the aim?
When I was in Albania, I was an archaeologist. I was a second year, started archaeology, and I excavated to my Kamenice, the Kamenice of Tumulus, and I was intrigued. I was captivated by the beauty of archaeology, particularly Bronze Age, and how people express that, but at the same time, how we as archaeologists could connect with people from the past. And after a long time in England, after bringing up 4 children, 13 years at home, I decided that archaeology is my passion. But rather than just doing something academic, which I do love excavation, I love research, I'm very interested on how we can bring archaeology to everyday people. How can we make archaeology useful, and how we can contribute to people in the street who want to know about it. And for a period of time, I was a freelance interpreter, Albanian English, and as an Albanian as well, I know what it's like to be a foreigner in another country, even though I'm officially British. And working with the refugees and asylum seekers, I was confronted with all the challenges that they face, the language barriers, the cultural barriers, the weather, the differences. And I couldn't wait for opportunity to do an archaeology event that connects people in a way that can relate to. It can be about people enjoying archaeology, learning through archaeology, but having a sense of identity with heritage culture. So in collaboration, ASHA North Staffordshire is an organization that works with refugees and asylum seekers. They help refugees with all process from English learning to doing papers, how to apply, how to get connected with police and all these things. And they do a fantastic job in collaborating with lots of people from all over the world. And there's lots of Albanians. And I had the privilege on the 22nd of June to organize a family festival of archaeology. And my son was involved as well. And it was such a pleasure to speak Albanian and for my son to see other part of Albanians. I'm really, really interested on engaging people, particularly, as you know, is the election day on the 4th of July, and refugees and asylum seekers been a hot topic. They've been blamed for everything. I'm not getting into all the politics, but it's been creating that us against them. The refugees are the problems. And as an Albanian, even though I didn't come as a refugee, you see that we foreigners have so much to bring to the country. It's not just the drug dealers and the bad people, but there's so much wealth that we can bring. It's all this idea that people come. It's not just the uneducated, it's people that want a better life. Mm-hmm. And some of the refugees are exceptionally educated, and yeah, it's just how to engage them. We can use archaeology. It's an international language. It's exciting, it's beautiful, and we can use to combine people, to bring people together, to give that sense of identity, to show people that we all have value, we all can engage. Archaeology and culture belongs to everyone.
A lot of Albanians have taken part in the initiatives that you have done, which is amazing. It's commendable. How do they react? You know, when they've arrived to England, they've been through a very stressful situation. They're in a hostile environment. Let's be honest, it is a hostile environment, I think, you know, in terms of the media and the government there. And you sort of turn up and talk to them about pottery and archaeology. Are they a bit like, oh, what's this? You know, are they confused at first? How do they react? How does their reaction change throughout the process?
It's been a very positive reaction. It's particularly the children who are living in the country and parents are still struggling with papers, whether they'll be sent to Albania or they'll be leaving. And I think it's good to give children as well a hope. And yes. I was talking to a couple of parents, and they were very happy to see, oh, it's great to see that Albanians are doing very well. It's good to see that we can contribute. It's good to make that connection, that is someone out there who's our voice, understand us, and there's hope for us. despite of all the challenges, and some of them are facing some difficult challenges, it's good to have someone that speaks our language and can talk to us and understand what's like.
What's next in your plans in the UK? And do you have any plans to bring any kind of similar initiative back to Albania?
I always believed, before I met my husband, I always believed that I wanted to contribute to Albania. I never wanted to leave. I know the challenges of Albania, but it's such a beautiful country, such beautiful people, culture, and I would love to do something in the future.
Melinda, thank you so much. And the work you're doing, this is great, especially for these children whose lives have sort of been turned upside down. They've arrived in this new place, and giving them this familiarity of home and letting them know there's a welcoming community there amongst all the noise from politics. This is really important. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alice.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. So last week, Albania published the long-awaited and long-delayed results of its 2023 population census. As predicted, everyone on social media became an expert about demographics. All the TV channels have been flooded with debate and analysis of the results. But I wanted to bring to Inside Albania an overview of what the key data means, and also to understand a bit more about why certain results are controversial, why people don't necessarily trust all of the results, and what this data means in terms of Albania and its future. To make sense of the noise, to make sense of the data, and to cut through some of the controversy, I decided to speak to an expert. I am interviewing today Dr. Arjen Joncha, an associate professor of demographics at the London School of Economics. Welcome to Inside Albania. How has Albania's population changed over the last decade? We know from the results published that it fell by 14% in 11 years to 2.4 million. But has there been an increase in foreign residents within the people that are left? You know, how many are old, how many are young? Can you explain a bit about, what's behind these numbers?
Thanks for the question. Well, Albanian population has continued to decrease. The annual growth rate of decrease is even higher. It's about 0.13%. At the same time that it was 0.12% over the previous decade. This is for two reasons. A, because the natural increase has reduced, despite that it's not the main factor of reduction. The number of births in absolute number have gone down. And we had 2 years, one was COVID, that the deaths overpassed the births. But the main reason continues to be migration. The net migration in Albania is about 480,000 when you take into account the natural increase, which means on average in the last 12 years since the previous census, there have been about 41,000 Albanians that have immigrated every year as a net, accounting for the returnees as well. Compared to in the previous decade, as you mentioned, it used to be something like 48,000 a year. So while in absolute number, the migration has slightly slowed down, in demographic terms, we'll say that the trend has not changed at all. Albanians leave the country en masse. Regarding the composition of the population, there are a couple of things to mention. In terms of the foreign people coming, it's too early to publish to analyze the data, because these were the preliminary results, and we have got only about 5 days that we have the information, this data, so we haven't had much time to analyze them. But one thing that is extremely important to note is that Albanian population is aging faster than any other population in Europe. And that is not due to traditional factors such as long-term trends of low migration, but mainly what we called aging from the middle. So the population has aged because there aren't many people now in the taxpayers' age for the Albanian population in order to either pay as you go for the pensions or to look after in terms of social care and many more other elements that are related to age.
Now, in your view, are the figures relating to population size accurate? People have said these are not accurate figures, they've been overreported, the real number is much less. But what do we know about this? Can we look at civil registry data? Can we look at other data that's publicly available? What is your view? Is the data accurate?
There is always a debate when the census comes in Albania. I've been involved in the last three during the period on democratic transition of Albania. And every time the data come, the opposition party tries to oppose, not accept the number, and always it's temporary. In the last census, I was as an EU expert advising the Institute of Statistics, and I remember that I was on the television trying to defend the data, that the data were accurate, when the opposition party, the party that is now in power, were opposing the numbers. Now that these data have come on the census of 2023, the opposition party that was in power in the last census is doing exactly the same, so is opposing the data. So more than anything else, I think it's a political issue. In terms of accuracy, there are two ways that we look at the data. The first way is that we look at the data from the methodology and process element of that. And the methodology has been modern. It's been within the standard of United Nations, UNFPA standards. It's been an international team in charge of the census. And the Instat itself has a tradition of good data collection. Just to mention one aspect of it, in 2001, when the Living Standard and Measurement Survey was organized for the first time in Albania, it was so accurate that the World Bank awarded it as the best survey of that particular decade in terms of organization and accuracy. So there is a tradition within the Institute of Statistics in Albania when it comes to accuracy of the data. What else can we say about that? For the first time, Albania used a CAPI system. So they had laptops with themselves or tablets, and the information was simultaneously, while being recorded in the tablets and going in the mainframe, in the main computer, where again in charge were the international experts, not the statistical institute in itself and any other people. So in respect to the process, it was that. More than anything, for the first time, we had the use of GIS, which was extremely important when it comes to identifying different places as well as empty households in order to be very accurate at the enumeration areas. We also had two questionnaires. There was the main one, the individual one, and the family one, and the household one. But also there was a small questionnaire, which was in order to ask questions to see the validation or the accuracy of the other question. That questionnaire also showed that it was pretty accurate. So in terms of the coefficients that came out, after the 1% post-census survey that we organized, which is a standard procedure in the whole world when censuses are organized, what we see is that we see a very small, very high coverage in the country, which is about 96.9, which is slightly higher than the previous census, but the margin of error is very, very small, smaller than in most developed countries, I would say, that we know. And the coefficient of refusal, the refusal rate is only 0.6%. It's unbelievably small. So in this respect, in terms of procedure and methodology, it was accurate. We also have another way of checking the accuracy of the data, and that comes from users, from people like myself, the demographers, where we try to analyze the data. And the result of the census of 2.4 million was within our expectations. I mean, my estimate was that it was going to be between 2.4 million and 2.45 million population. While Instat, in its projection, it had it at 2.7 million because they haven't revised the assumption of emigration, which people like myself did based on the European data that were coming either on political asylums or on the number of emigrants in the countries based on their censuses of 2021. So I'm confident the data are accurate, but more data are coming, and when we do the analysis, we'll be able to tell more about it.
What about religion? Albania is a secular country, but the results show a majority who say that they are Muslim. However, this majority has fallen below 50% for the first time. Again, these figures have been disputed, and I myself am not completely convinced, because when I took part in the census, I really had to fight to write agnostic for them to note me down as agnostic. Do you feel that these figures relating to religion are accurate? And also, I want to ask, why is the topic of religion in terms of the population so controversial in Albania?
There are a couple of things about religion when it comes to data. Religion is difficult to be asked anywhere in the world. I remember when I teach my students the accuracy of self-declared data, I always give the experience of England and Wales census. I think it was 1991, when 4% of the population reported themselves as Jediah, in a way that based on the Star Wars movie. So in that respect, religion and ethnicity by default are self-reported measurements where people tend to report whatever they have in mind. And in particular, religion in Albania is an issue that hasn't been a problem for a very long time. The two censuses cannot be compared because the question was asked in a different way in both the religion as well as ethnicity. But as it comes to religion, it's very difficult in the Albanian context to ask the question of religion when you have two generations that grew up without any religion education, where religion was prohibited, but the country is by default very, very tolerant in religion. It's named as an extremely tolerant society, where even in the small villages of about 400 households, you still have Muslim as well as Christian Orthodox or Christian Catholics. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that. One of the interesting things is as you mentioned in your question about the agnostics or the atheists, I think one of the, I did have my arguments when the questionnaire was created for this census, and I asked the question of practice as one of the first questions to be asked when religion was being asked, if the person is religious and if they practice. Because Albanians, like in a lot of other cultures, say the religion of their surname or their ancestors rather than their own religion. And so in that respect, it creates this complication of what they are. The moment that you take the practice of, the country becomes pretty much very secular. As it is in their constitution. So I wouldn't interpret that the number of Muslims have gone down and the number of Christians have gone up and the number of different Protestant, well, the number of Protestants has increased because Albania has been opened in the last 30 years, so there have been quite a lot of different religions coming in the country. So I wouldn't worry too much. In terms of ethnicity, I think the census was pretty much accurate. Even the prop question came up with the same thing. For example, the largest minority that we have had in the country have been the Greek population. And if we leave what's been asked during this period and compare this with the last census under communism in 1989, for example, I remember that the number of Greeks or population declared as Greek population in 1989 was something like 56,000 people. And if you look at the number of Greeks in 2023 census, about 24,000 people, which is almost half of the population of Greeks in 1989, which coincides with the fact that half of the Albanian population, as it should have been without migration, has emigrated. So in a way, the percentage of are pretty much the same because the reasons behind migration are the same. So it shows that even ethnicity, which is a very controversial issue to be asked, despite that it's a very homogeneous society, still the data was relatively accurate. Not put in very accurate, because I do have issues with self-reported measurements.
Are there any other areas of concern with the census results? For example, minorities, Greek, Macedonian. I know that there have been comments from the minorities themselves, but also Greece and North Macedonia, and they've said that the results are not accurate, that they've been manipulated. Do you think this is the case? What reason would the government have to manipulate these results?
The example that I gave about the Greeks show pretty much the picture which most of the analysts, most of the demographers expect, in a way that this is. What has happened during the last 3 decades, as you mentioned, because a lot of Albanians went to Greece, changed their names, became from Muslim into Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, and the Greeks started to develop this concept that there are more Greeks in Albania than that we believe they are, or the statistics were telling us. In fact, now that there is a sense of Albanian identity among migrants anywhere in Greece or UK or Italy and United States, this thing has changed. And in a way, Albanians are not being declared now as Greek. Wherever they are, they're declared as Albanian. And even the Albanians that are in Albania, that they have their children, for example, there, they declare themselves as what they are. So there is no pressure about the pensions that they are getting from Greece or any other visas or things that would work as incentive to be declared other than what you are. So in that respect, this is all political. I think the Macedonian community, I might be wrong, has come out a bit higher than the previous census, and the Roma community has definitely come higher. And that shows a sense of freedom in declaring. The Roma community never declared themselves as Roma in the past. So this shows probably that there is a sense of identity among these communities in terms of declaring themselves in what they are, which I see it as a positive side in terms of minorities in Albania.
Ariane, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. That's all for this week. You can watch Inside Albania next week on Saturday on Euronews Albania. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, Euronews Albania, or across all major podcasting platforms. Until next time, Miropavshin.